How did you get here? Because there's so many different disciplines within the law field that one can go into. So how did you get into this lane when it came to your practice?
Kind of by accident. To be perfectly honest, I was a journalism major in college. My family owns a newspaper. In fact, it is 130 years old this year. And, I always thought, okay, I'm going to go into journalism and I'm going to tell our stories and I'm going to make sure that we know what's going on. And just by happenstance, right? One day I was driving down the street getting ready for this internship I was going to do in New York, and I was rear-ended by a drunk driver, and that changed everything, right? I had to be in physical therapy for a summer. I couldn't move to New York, and I had to redefine sort of what my life was going to be that summer. And I had the great fortune of working at the Murphy firm, Murphy, Falcon and Murphy in Baltimore, while they were dealing in a civil case for police brutality. And it was eye opening. So for me, I was like, oh my gosh, there's this whole other way in which I can be an advocate. And I started taking law classes as soon as I went back to college. And um, I took the LSAT and went to law school thinking I'm going to be a civil rights attorney. um, I'm going to change the criminal justice system, right? Everybody wants to change the criminal justice system. I started out in the public defender's office as an intern, and then an intern in the state's attorney's office, and then a assistant state's attorney in Baltimore City. And during that time, the Trayvon Martin happened, Michael Brown happened, Eric Garner happened, and the list goes on and on and on, as we all know. And what I learned was that I cannot sit idly by. So I found myself protesting all around the country and being really actively involved in the conversation about our lives, right? And in that exploration and in that study, I kept trying to figure out, well, why are we constantly in this cycle of poverty? It's not that people aren't creating. It's not that we are not creative. It's not that we are not business owners and homeowners and have assets. Why is it not becoming intergenerational? And the more I researched and the more I learned about intergenerational wealth and how it functions, the more I realized nobody was talking about it for us, right? We talk about go get businesses, invest in retirement accounts, buy a house, right? All of these pieces of generational wealth, but nobody was talking about how do you keep it? How do you protect it? How do you make sure that when you get sick or pass away, that your kids keep it? Because we lose the majority of our earned wealth at the generation transfer every time somebody gets sick or passes away. And from that point, I said, I have to do something. If nobody else is going to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it. And that's what we did. My mother was in charitable planning, right? Kind of in that essence, she worked on a lot of nonprofit boards. And so she was dealing with billionaire families who then their trust and their charitable giving and the tax benefits they were getting, and seeing these really incredible setup plans. And I was in litigation seeing all of these people who look like me and you losing. And we said, hey, we're going to join forces and take what we know and share it with our community. So that's what we've been doing ever since.
The term generational wealth can take on a different definition for different people, or they've heard it different ways. So you dove into actual research on the same. You said intergenerational wealth. So kind of help us understand what exactly does that mean, because a lot of us are pursuing it, but we don't actually know in totality what we're pursuing.
Yeah. So when I think about intergenerational wealth, I don't just think about wealth for me and for my children. I'm thinking about for me, for my children, for my grandchildren, for my great grandchildren. How do I perpetuate this in perpetuity so that the people who come after me are constantly building on top of the previous generation? What we have right now in the African American community specifically is, according to a study done in 2017, that only 13% of college educated African Americans are getting $10,000 or more the next generation, right? That's where we are right now. So 87% of college educated African Americans are not even getting $10,000. And they used $10,000 as the barometer because they said it had the ability to be transformational in someone's life. It could change the paycheck to paycheck cycle. It was enough to make an investment that could be meaningful, right? So it was enough to get someone out of this cycle of poverty if properly leveraged. And 87% of us aren't even doing that. So when we're looking at the numbers and we're thinking generational wealth, it's great to have a business that gets you comfortable. It's wonderful to have a home and to be able to provide a great education for your children. Absolutely, those are wealth building tools. But if the next generation then loses that house, if the next generation isn't able to buy a home, then they're not standing on our shoulders, right? They're starting over from zero. And what we know is that most people are starting over from a negative. More than 70% of African Americans have no estate planning at all. So there's no plan for what happens with what we're building once we get sick or pass away. And that's where we're losing.
All right. So what's missing from our conversation? Because you talked about how it's trendy to talk about entrepreneurship. It might be even trendy to talk about investments, but you're saying that's not enough. There's more to the conversation that other people are having that we're not having. So what are we missing?
We're missing the protection piece, right? It is important to have an investment account. It's important to be actively engaged in the market, but it's not enough to just name beneficiaries on that brokerage account. Likely you want your trust to hold it, and you want your trust to create subtrust for your kids, and you want that trust to have restrictions. You want that trust to provide creditor protection for your children, perhaps divorce protection for your children, perhaps spendthrift provisions, right? Things to limit their ability to squander it, some instructions on what to do with it. We don't have any of that. We're lucky if we even have beneficiaries designated on those accounts, because oftentimes people don't even go that far to say who should get it once they're gone. And so we're missing that piece. It's about what we do right now. Everyone's like, I'm putting money in, I'm doing it. But they don't think about the what if. And not even what if, but what when. What happens when? Because none of us are getting out of here alive. Creating businesses, again, is great. But if you don't have a solid business structure, if you're just operating sort of willy nilly, then you're at risk. What happens if you get sued and now you're sued personally? What happens if you get sick, or what happens if your business partner passes away and now you're in business with their kids? If you don't have a buy sell agreement, or you don't have something in place to make your business continue to function, then you're in a lawsuit, and now that business may be lost. In fact, most family businesses in the African American community don't make it 2 and 3 generations.
A lot of directions I want to go now. So I'll start here. You use the word trust, and I know automatically people are envisioning entertainers, or they're envisioning athletes, or they're envisioning business tycoons like Jeff Bezos or something like that. And like, that has nothing to do with me having a trust. Um, is a trust just for people like that, or are other people of different levels of socioeconomic status need to be considering trust as well? And when you say protection, what are some of the things that we need to know about protecting? Because again, some people might be like, well, I just have this or I just have that. It's not like I'm sitting on a mountain of cash like these people I see on TV.
Yeah. The I just have this little bit is always the struggle. Trusts are for everybody, right? Now, if you don't own a home and you don't have assets, or you don't have minor kids, or certain things like that, then you may not need a trust, right? But if you own a home is a probatable asset, meaning you would have to go through probate court to transfer title on that asset after you're gone. A trust would avoid probate entirely, because you would have transferred the title to that asset while you're alive, and then designated who is able to legally manage it after you're gone. So you don't need a judge. So anyone who owns a home should have a trust to protect that asset. So I don't care if your home is worth $50,000 or $50 million, you're going to have some form of trust structure to protect that from the probate court as your bare minimum. If you've got minor kids, you're likely going to want to look at a trust based structure for protection of their assets, to control who manages their finances and how. It's the only thing that really allows you to continue to leave instructions for your kids, right? So for me, my son is 4.5. And if I pass away before he graduates from high school and he does really well in school, how do I show him that I'm proud of him? How do I congratulate him? The only thing that's left is my assets. So he gets a little bit of money outright, free of trust. I've written a letter that encourages him to travel. But it's my way of saying, even after I'm gone, I'm proud of you. This is important, and you're doing a great job. If he goes to college and he gets a free ride, then he gets even more money sort of staggered over that period of time in school to do what he wants with. And in that conversation, I make suggestions. You should buy, a piece of real estate, rent it out, get some roommates, start your portfolio. But really, it's up to him.